Blair. What a great day of sharing. I'm here to tell you climate change is the most significant challenge that humanity faces over the course of the 21st century. And I don't say that lightly. But I say that because climate change is going to make every other challenge that we face more difficult or impossible to address. For example, childhood hunger and food insecurity in this country and around the globe is certainly a grand challenge. One that's going to be made more difficult by the issue of climate change because the excess heat and the drought and the floods driven by climate change are going to reduce crop production in the tropics and the temperate regions where most of humanity lives. Perhaps you think national security or reducing conflict around the globe is the most significant challenge, right? It's a challenge that's going to be made more difficult by the issue of climate change. The Pentagon recently came out with a report to Congress that states that climate change is a threat multiplier, one that aggravates political tensions, poverty, environmental degradations, and social tensions that fuel conflict around the globe. Preserving ecosystems and biodiversity around the world is also a grand challenge, one that's made more difficult by the issue of climate change. In fact, we are already in the midst of the 6th great extinction, in no small part because climate change is causing climate to change much faster than species or ecosystems can actually adapt. Human health, public health is also a grand challenge and one that's going to be made more difficult by climate change because climate change is going to lead to more air pollution and more pollen and more floods and more ticks and mosquitoes that spread disease. With that frame on climate change, there's words that keep me up at night. There's words that haunt me. And I first heard them about a decade ago when I was down at a meeting for climate scientists in Washington, D.C. And the federal representative said, "You scientists, it's not enough for you to figure climate change out and publish it in papers. If you look back 20 to 30 to 40 years from now, you can't just say, 'I told you so.' You need to get engaged. You need to help society figure out how to solve this challenge." And those are words that have driven my career for the last decade. So I want to share 3 perspectives on climate change with you today that I hope will really propel action. The first is that climate changes. It always has changed and always will change. The only difference today is that humans are the main driver of that change. There's an overwhelming body of evidence and growing body of scientific evidence that shows that this is the case. And in fact, when climate scientists are surveyed, 97% of them state that they have come to their same independent conclusion that humans are the main drivers of that climate change. Once you accept that, what that means is that the future climate is literally in our hands. The decisions we make over the course of the next year to the next decade will determine so the decisions we make about how we produce and how we use energy will determine the climate that our children and grandchildren inherit. So let me share with you a few examples of climate change, how our climate has changed. Here I have a record that's been developed from 2 different ice cores in Antarctica that shows how carbon dioxide and temperature have changed over the last 800,000 years. That alone is incredibly cool, right? I look at this graph and it is as beautiful to me as a Mozart symphony or a Van Gogh painting or the Boston Red Sox winning the World Series, right? This intricate dance between the carbon dioxide record in blue and Antarctic temperature in orange, right? High carbon dioxide, warm temperatures, low carbon dioxide, cool temperatures, right? They have varied in phase for the course of the last 800,000 years, and we've seen tremendous climate change over this period, right? The waxing and waning of huge glaciers across the northern hemisphere. You'll also notice that carbon dioxide has never been higher than 300 parts per million over the course of that time period. Enter the Industrial Revolution, we figure out how to burn fossil fuel, it gives us energy, that's great, but it actually has this byproduct of carbon dioxide emitted to the atmosphere. That's how much we've changed the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere just since we started monitoring it in 1957. And if we're not careful, we're going to end up where we're going, up to 1,000 to 1,200 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that's going to result in catastrophic climate change. That's really what we have to avoid. Coming way back, way more closer to the recent past, another shocking example of how rapidly our climate is changing is actually the retreat of Arctic sea ice. Now, Arctic sea ice grows back every winter and decreases in the summer, but really we've seen this long-term decline in the extent of Arctic sea ice as measured by satellites. Why do you care about Arctic sea ice? Well, it's the air conditioner for the northern hemisphere. It essentially reflects incoming solar radiation right back out into space and keeps the planet cool. We get rid of it, that ocean water is going to absorb much more solar radiation, heat up, and retain that warmth. And in fact, we expect to see the Arctic sea ice disappear at the end of the summer within the next decade or two. And it's not coming back because the ocean is going to warm up enough. It's going to be really difficult for it to come back. Another prime example is rising seas around the world. Rising seas unto themselves probably aren't the biggest challenge, but when you couple that with big coastal storms, big hurricanes, big nor'easters, we get an exponential increase in the amount of damage, similar to what happened in Superstorm Sandy and Hurricane Katrina. And we're also seeing big increases in freshwater flooding because we're getting way more rain in these big extreme precipitation events that lead to flooding. So, the bad news is climate's changing, it's caused by us, and if we don't do something about it, it's going to get a lot worse. The good news is it's caused by us, so we can actually do something about it. And that brings me to my second point. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I want to talk a little bit about how climate might change in the future across New Hampshire before I get into my second point. It really depends, as I've said, on whether we follow a high emissions or a low emissions scenario. If we follow a high emissions scenario, our summers are going to feel like they currently do in North Carolina. Think air conditioning all summer. Under a low emissions scenario, they're still going to feel like they currently do in Washington, D.C. That's a world we need to start preparing for. We're going to get even more rain, and more of that rain is going to come in fewer events, and that's going to lead to flooding. Paradoxically, we're also going to have more droughts because very little of that increase in rain is going to come in summer, but we're going to have hot temperatures. It's going to lead to enhanced evaporation. Not something I think we know how to deal with in New Hampshire and New England. Our winters are going to get shorter. We're going to have much less snow and ice and much less opportunity for winter recreation. Greenland and Antarctica are going to continue to melt, raising sea levels on the order of 2 to 5 feet by the end of the century. And we're going to see this continued expansion of ticks and mosquitoes that spread disease. Got it. I wanted to share one other potential impact. This is a map, actually, of Portsmouth and what we might expect with a 12-foot storm surge. You might think this is crazy, but a 12-foot storm surge is exactly what New Jersey experienced during Hurricane Sandy. So our biggest storm surge in the past has been about 7 feet, so add 5 feet of sea level rise to that, or we get a really big hurricane. This is not likely, but it's possible. And what I'm showing you here in the yellow color is the depth of water on land, that's 0 to 3 feet. In the pink, 3 to 6 feet. In the orange, 6 to 9 feet. And in the blue, greater than 9 feet of water over the land. So let me just zoom in. Actually, you'll see here, hopefully you've oriented yourself. Here's our major employer, right? Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. You can see most of it underwater. You can imagine that the Navy is actually rather concerned about its coastal infrastructure around the world. Let me just zoom in right on downtown Portsmouth and South Mill Pond. And what I wanted to show you here is this area, more than 9 feet of water. Anybody know where that is? Right? Strawberry Bank. No, we're not bad here. We're doing all right. Right? But you can also see new infrastructure, our library, our new schools over here, right? 6 to 9 feet of water. We have time to deal with this. Don't panic. Don't need to run out. But we have to start thinking about how we're going to protect our critical infrastructure. And it's not just Portsmouth. It's going to be in every coastal city around America and every coastal city around the world. All right. So that brings me to the good news, bad news, right? Bad news is climate's changing. It's caused by us. It's going to get worse if we don't do something about it. The good news is it's caused by us, so we can do something about it. So really what we have to do is we have to figure out how we decouple our economic activity from our greenhouse gas emissions. And in fact, that's exactly what we're doing in New Hampshire already. You can see in the red line here, our greenhouse gas emissions turned in 2004 and 2005 and have begun decreasing at the same time that our gross state product has increased. So my second point is that climate change is the innovation opportunity of the 21st century. And I'm going to talk about 5 different areas of innovation that I think we need to see, although they're not the only ones. Obviously, renewable energy, right? We've got offshore wind in the Gulf of Maine. We've got to figure that out. We have to figure out better and more efficient ways that we can harness energy from the sun. We've got a huge ocean out here that has tremendous amounts of power. We need to figure out how to harness that with tidal and wave energy. And we need to figure out how we develop biofuels without putting our food system at risk. But that's not enough. We also need to innovate in the first talk we heard this morning by Carol about slow money. We need to figure out how we get that money that we're saving to work for our communities. Not only do we have to do it for agricultural production, but we need to do it for energy efficiency and renewables in our homes. Right? One of the biggest barriers to homeowners making their homes energy efficient is the initial investment. So we need to figure out how we get that money, private money, out of the stock market and into our communities. And there's lots of great examples. Across New Hampshire, the Clean Tech Fund, Community Development Finance Authority, Community Loan Fund, the Jordan Institute, and many others that are beginning to figure this out. This is really important. We need capital to solve these big challenges, and that capital is not going to come from governments. It needs to come from us, so we need those financial instruments. That's not enough, though. We need to figure out and actually continue the innovation that started about 15 to 20 years ago in the way we go about preserving our ecosystems, as well as our working landscapes. There's been a wonderful trend in this country of public-private partnerships leveraging federal funds to actually preserve land, led by the Nature Conservancy and led by land trusts around the country. In the state of New Hampshire alone, in the last 15 years, we've preserved 200,000 acres of land. We need to figure out how we continue that, because it's these ecosystems that give us the fresh air and the fresh water and the soil and timber and areas to recreate that make the quality of life in the place where we live so great. That's not enough. We also need to figure out how we collectively make difficult decisions about the future. We have a wonderful model here in New Hampshire and New England in the town hall meeting. Anybody been to a town hall meeting? All right, great model. But it's really focused on municipal decision making. The challenge is how we take municipal decision making and do it with state government and federal government and businesses and not-for-profits and academics, and how we work together in a much broader network to bring all that expertise and experience to bear on the problem. It's not that we need more institutions. We need our existing institutions to work much better together. And last but not least, we need to figure out what to do with higher education, right? This is not what we need to do. We don't need to get back to the ivory tower. What we need to do is transform this notion of academics sometimes doing outreach, being the expert, and instead actually going out and engaging with communities in mutually beneficial collaborations that help solve societal problems. And we need to reward those academics that do it. Right? That's going to be part of the social change that we need. So it's not about innovation in any one area, right? In fact, we need to transition from the tyranny of or to the opportunity of and. We need technology innovation, right? We need innovation in the way our networks work. We need innovation in the way we finance things that we want to see happen in our community. We need innovation across all of those if we're going to help solve this problem. All right, third point. Climate change is a moral issue. And I think about this on 3 different levels. It's those who are most vulnerable, who are going to suffer the most, the poor, the young, the old, and the sick. And you need look no further than Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy to realize that's the case. When I was driving around this week and emitting carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, it's going to be in the atmosphere for well over 100 years. I get the benefit. I'm going to put that impact on future generations. I don't think that's morally defensible. And last but not least, there's native cultures and island nations around the world that are beginning to ask, and very loudly, why do we need to pay for the loss of our culture for your lifestyle? We have a moral obligation to reduce the impact of climate change on those who are most vulnerable, on future generations who are not born yet, and on those island nations and cultures that are most at risk of disappearing. Oops. Well, it's too late now. So in sum, climate's changing. It's caused by us, and we can solve it. I've been working on the issue of climate change, talking about it and doing research for about the last 25 years. And on more than one occasion, I've been called Dr. Doom. But I also love to dance. And that's the frame that I choose to use to view the challenge of climate change. Right? The storm clouds are here, and what we need to do is take Vivian Green's advice and learn how to dance in the rain. And that is going to require innovation, and it's going to require figuring out how it is we work together. So consider yourself informed. Right? It's not enough now to say 20 to 30 to 40 years from now, I told you so. My question for you, my question for our community, my question for our society is, what are we going to do about it? We have the obligation, we have the responsibility, but what I really want to leave you with is we have the opportunity to act. Who amongst us is going to step forward? I look forward to working with all of you and many others across New England to build a weather resilient, to build a more sustainable, and to build an energy secure future for generations to come. Thank you.